control devices with their thoughts. What are your thoughts on that?
I guess every person at a certain age starts to get freaked out by new technology. And I've hit my limit. I'm going to take a pass on that one.
Me too. My brain goes to some pretty dark places, and I do not need my phone knowing about it. The project is in the early stages, but aims to revolutionize how you interact with technology. The paper says people would get brain implants and then be able to control their iPhones and other Apple devices with their thoughts. So does that mean we'd undergo surgery every 5 years when they come out with a new phone?
Well, that's part of what's terrifying. The other thing that terrifies me is, I'm already bombarded. Every screen I've got bombards me with a bunch of stuff I don't want, like pop-ups. Remember that whole, the 90s and the early aughts, the pop-up issue?
Yeah.
And there's still ads. It sounds nice because they're making it sound like the directions are only going to go in one direction. But we both know that's not how this will end. We'll start getting stuff in front of our faces we don't want.
Yeah. Like if I have a nasty thought about something something I don't like that's going on in government, all of a sudden I'm going to get reported to somebody because I thought something. Yeah, that's great. All right. Consumers Research is alerting the Trump administration to nationwide continuing discriminatory practices. Now that's nationwide is on your side, jumps into my head. That's an insurance company, right?
Yeah, ostensibly, but I can tell you they're not on our side. We put out a woke alert about them changing their Department of DEI to Department of Belonging a few weeks ago. And in response, I got a call from their attorney threatening me, accusing me of defaming that company for accusing them of discriminatory practices in the past. So I said, okay, let me do a deeper dive. And what I found was absolutely shocking. Not only had they engaged in DEI, but it was some of the most egregious cases of this DEI that I had seen. All kinds of involvement, special programs that were just for women, apprenticeship, mentorship programs for leadership, and they would brag in certain articles about how we went from this percentage of female executives to that percentage, and they credit themselves with having leadership and mentorship programs that are only open to women and women of color. And then they bragged about all of the ones. They have 19 different affinity groups that are based on, quote unquote, demographics and interests. Something tells me they're not mentoring people to be executives because they like knitting. Okay, so they are doing that because they are separating people, sorting people by their demographics. Yeah, and so we basically want their lawyer actually hit me up, caused me to do a deep dive on them, and so we've done all this work. We might as well alert the Trump administration as they work to push back. There's a Trump executive order asking each department to find 9 organizations or corporations that need to be investigated and persecuted for DEI, and we think that Nationwide makes a great candidate for that, and so we've sent them a letter.
Okay, so you sent them a letter. Now, this whole defamation thing that Nationwide is talking about, with you talking about it on the air, isn't this kind of putting a nail in your big toe?
It could be, but the problem for them is that truth is a defense to a defamation claim. You're allowed to say whatever you want if it's correct. And I have pages. That letter that I mentioned to you is 10 pages long of examples. I would bore your listeners to death if I detailed all the things we found that they were doing that seems to be pretty obvious they were engaging in discrimination in promotion and hiring.
Well, they helped create an organization called the Financial Alliance for Racial Equity, and they call it FAIR, F-A-R-E, which is actually kind of creative. But the mission was to close the wealth gap by increasing racial diversity, which is DEI, affirmative action.
Exactly.
That's basically what it is. So I don't know. Maybe some of these people were extremely talented. Maybe they would have got the job even without this. But I would hate to be lumped into that group, because then now people are going to question, did I get the job because I was good enough, or did I get the job just because I'm a chick?
Well, that's exactly right. And that's one of the things I try to remind people about DEI whenever we talk about it. It's not even good for the groups that supposedly it's discriminating on behalf of. Because if you start introducing a bunch of unqualified people based on their race into a group of qualified people who had nothing to do with the race, but they're all the same race, you will start to reintroduce stereotypes of incompetence and low skills that otherwise had completely gone away. We see, my wife is a physician. I've never thought for 1 second what the color of the skin of my doctor is when they walk into the room. But because of what they're doing in the med schools today, unfortunately, with the affirmative action that's gone on there with, people of different races getting in with different MCAT scores, you're going to have a different level of quality, and that's all going to break down. People are going to start rationally realizing that, and that's not a racial comment, to be clear. You could do that with anything. If you started doing that for every left-handed person, if every left-handed person didn't have to make the same grades or get the same scores to be a doctor, people would start to get worried when they have a left-handed doctor. And so this is bad for everyone involved. The only people who benefit from the DEI grift are the DEI grifters. People need to be eliminated from these corporations, chiseled out. They're the only people who benefit. So it's one of the reasons we're raising the alarm on Nationwide. But the other reason is they threaten me, and I don't like that. I have a legal team, and we have people that review all this stuff. I don't have to worry because I know we've got our facts straight, and we're right, and we could afford the litigation. But when corporations push their weight around like this, what if I was a citizen journalist? What if I was just someone that did this part-time as a stay-at-home mom, or somebody who's an engineer who also likes to do investigative work? And I put this out on Twitter, and I'd gotten a call from a big name defamation attorney on behalf of Nationwide. Even if I was right, even if I was 100% right, which I am, I would have to think seriously about whether I could afford to litigate with such a big company. So let me just make this clear. When companies come and threaten us and we're right, listen, if we're wrong, we're wrong. Point it out, we'll correct it. But when we're right, we will all you're doing is calling down an airstrike on your own position, because we are going to double, triple, quadruple down, and that's what we're doing here.
I love it. I mean, I don't know anything about Nationwide. I've never used them. I've never bought from them. I've never even actually considered them. But Trump's executive order about DEI was very, very clear. So a lot of people think if they just change the label of that department, then they've done what they're supposed to do. But it's the actionary position of that department that's the problem, not the label.
Right, exactly. And that's what's funny, because that's what led to the threat. I said all they're doing is relabeling discriminatory activities. Mm-hmm. DEI, going from DEI to belonging, doesn't change when you haven't changed personnel, when you haven't changed the website. Literally, all they did was a find and replace on the DEI website. It's the same site with the same personnel. And DEI is inherently discriminatory. There is no way to do DEI. You cannot say, well, we're only helping out one racial group, we're not hurting another. Black letter labor law on this is very clear. The EEOC is not buying that. If you try to help one group, you are by definition hurting another one, because they're not being judged based solely on competence and skill and merit. They're being judged on, at least partially, on not having this racial characteristic that you're selecting for. And so there is no way to do non-discriminatory DEI, and Nationwide has been knee-deep in DEI. I'll tell you one other thing that, I said I wouldn't bore your listeners. I hope you find this interesting. But they were one of their top legal staff was part of something called the Leadership Council on Legal Diversity, LCLD. And that organization exists as a membership for corporations to basically run a cartel of legal work, that if you want their business, if you want, these members like Nationwide legal work, which is, for big law, that's how they eat, right? These big mm-hmm. cases, big legal work. You have to prove to them that you have hit all these DEI as a law firm, not a corporation, but the corporations are saying, if you want our legal work, you have to hit a bunch of DEI metrics and goals that we're setting for you, or you will not get our business. And that's what the LCLD does. And Nationwide was a big member of this. So they're not only just engaging in DEI in their own organization, they're helping push it out into other things like law firms that need it to get their business. So, that's what's so incredible about them trying to threaten about this, is that all it did was draw attention to how knee deep in this stuff they were. I already knew they were doing DI. I had no idea it went this deep and was this bad. That's what led to this campaign.
Well, and now their partnerships are going to probably start sweating a little bit, wouldn't you think?
Well, I would hope that someone like Peyton Manning, who doesn't seem to engage in DEI or support all this stuff, would really question whether this is the company that he wants to be associated with. I know he's been their spokesperson for many years, but I wouldn't want to have my name associated with DEI. I'd at least want to say, hey, I don't support what they were doing in that regard. So yeah, I do think it raises questions as to whether people want to be partnered with Nationwide and associated with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, somebody just said, but do they have good insurance? I don't know. I've never used them. I can't speak on that. And that's really not even what we're talking about right now. If you want to know what kind of insurance they have, get a quote. What we're talking about today is the fact that DEI hiring policies are now illegal in the United States. Having a DEI department is unacceptable because it's discriminatory against other people, whether they are Asian, Native American, Chinese, whatever they are. It shouldn't matter. The best person should get the job. They shouldn't have entire committees that are set up to make sure they can hire enough women to be corporate leaders and that sort of thing. I believe in equal pay for equal jobs, but I don't believe in women getting the job just because they have a vajayjay. I think that they should have the talent to do the job.
Well, that's true. I even women who think they don't disagree, ask them if they'd like to have a female OBGYN who just got the job because she was a woman, right?
No, but I do prefer to have a woman OBGYN. And sometimes as a woman, I want a woman doctor because I want to ask her questions about woman things, and I'm not comfortable asking a man.
100%. But my point is, everyone who says that they're okay with there being discrimination in employment to elevate to certain quote unquote underprivileged groups, they don't say that when it's their life on the line. Do they want a heart surgeon who got elevated for that reason?
Yeah, no,
right?
Nope.
Okay. Yeah, and I'm not saying that women shouldn't prefer. My wife's an OBGYN. That's why I use that example. I think it's perfectly appropriate for women to want a female OBGYN. My point is, you don't want her to be an OBGYN simply because she's a woman. You want her to be an OBGYN because she's a good doctor.
Yeah.
Right?
I don't want her to go in and tell me I'm having twins when I'm not pregnant. I don't want that.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the thing. Everyone sings a different tune when it's their consequences are on the line for them, right?
Yeah. And I worry a little bit about being charitable when they do campaigns and stuff like that too, because where is my money actually going? I would worry about that too.
Well, and that's what I would say to your listener who asked about do they have good insurance. And I can't judge on that. I've never used nationwide insurance. What I would say is one of the issues with DEI, I talked about what it does to reinstitute racial and sexual stereotypes. But for the actual consumer, right, we're the nation's oldest consumer protection organization. For the consumer, the issue is whenever you are focused on something that's not serving the consumer, the product and the services suffer. And we've seen this over and over again. Look at Boeing. They can't make an airplane. And what was Boeing knee deep in? DEI, right? They were focused on hiring people of a specific background or specific skin color or specific sex, and they weren't focused on the fact that they needed to actually deliver the new Air Force One to President Trump so you didn't have to get one from Qatar, which now is causing a huge controversy. Yeah. They were focused on that instead of making sure that the doors didn't rip off as they were flying down. People may not remember that, but a few months ago, a door just fell off of a Boeing midair, right?
Yep.
It's you can say, well, the two things are related, but that's the problem. When you don't focus, if you're trying to lose weight, but you're every day what you focus on is what you're going to have for lunch, you're probably not going to lose weight because you're not focused on the right thing. You need to be focusing on serving consumers with the best products and services. Otherwise, it's going to suffer, and the treatment of customers is going to suffer.
I'm so excited. I had someone on the show today who was as passionate about when you get passionate about something, your voice goes faster, you get a little bit louder, it gets a little bit higher. It's like, I got this. If you want to know more, Will Hild is the executive director at Consumers Research. Good thing I'm in radio since I speak so well. Nationwide, continuing its DEI policies by calling it FARE, fair, and they threatened to sue Will, so Will is tripling down. You go, Will.
Thank you very much. If people want to learn more, can visit us at consumersresearch.org.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you.
Thank you.